story of an entire town trained to obey one man. And when that man went to prison, they didn't stop obeying. They just found a new one. In the desert, along the Arizona-Utah border, there's a place called Short Creek. Two small towns, Colorado City and Hildale, pressed against red cliffs, cut off from the world. For decades, this community belonged to the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the FLDS, a faith built around one idea: the prophet speaks for God, and whatever the prophet says, you do. You keep sweet. That was the phrase. Keep sweet. Smile through the pain. Obey without expression. For thousands of people in Short Creek, this wasn't just religion. It was the only reality they had ever known. No television, no internet, no outside friends. Children listened to recorded sermons on church-issued iPods. The prophet's voice was the only voice that mattered. That prophet was Warren Jeffs. Under his rule, families were torn apart on command. Wives were reassigned from one man to another overnight. Daughters as young as 14 were given to men 3 times their age. Anyone who questioned Jeffs faced the worst punishment the community could imagine. Not physical harm, exile. You would lose your family, your home, your place in heaven. Jeffs didn't just demand obedience. He made independent thought feel like a sin. And that detail matters more than you might think. In 2011, Jeffs was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. And here's where the story takes a turn no one expected. From behind bars, Jeffs declared every marriage in the community void. He ordered that no couple could be intimate until he personally came out of prison to reseal them. If anyone conceived a child, they would be excommunicated. He banned bicycles, trampolines, children's toys. The cruelty was precise. He couldn't lead his people in person anymore, so he froze their lives entirely. And thousands of adults obeyed. They stopped living as husbands and wives. They stopped having children. They waited for prison walls to crumble the way Jeffs promised they would. Some left the faith, but the ones who stayed became even more devoted. The more unreasonable the demand, the deeper the loyalty of those who comply. But something wasn't right. A vacuum was forming. Jeffs had gone silent. No new marriages, no guidance, no path forward. In a community engineered to follow, where questioning authority had been made impossible through decades of conditioning, that silence didn't create freedom. It created a vacancy, and someone was going to fill it. His name was Samuel Baitman. He wasn't an outsider. He was one of them. A lifelong FLDS member who had once stood in a courtroom watching Warren Jeffs' trial, faithful to the end. But by 2019, Bateman started telling people that Jeffs was no longer the prophet, that God was now speaking through him. He offered something Jeffs had taken away: purpose, direction, a voice that told them what to do next. In a world built around obedience to a prophet, that was all it took. A small group gathered around him. They called themselves the Samuelites. And then the pattern repeated. Bateman began claiming women and young girls from his male followers as his spiritual wives. He insisted it was God's will. He said he was acting on orders from the Heavenly Father. The youngest was 9 years old. Fathers handed over their daughters. Mothers watched. Not because they didn't love their children, but because they had been raised in a system where loving your children and obeying the prophet were never supposed to be in conflict. When they finally collided, obedience won, because that's the only wiring they had. What investigators discovered next changed everything. In August 2022, someone on a highway near Flagstaff noticed something disturbing. Small fingers reaching through the slats of a cargo trailer being towed behind a truck. They called 911. When officers opened that trailer, they found 3 girls inside, ages 11 to 14. No ventilation, a makeshift toilet, each wearing a wedding ring. Bateman was behind the wheel. He was arrested and charged. But here's what stunned investigators. He was released on bond. And the moment he got out, he instructed his followers to destroy evidence. Delete the signal messages, shred the diaries, hide the devices. Weeks later, the FBI raided his homes in Colorado City. 9 children were removed and placed in protective custody, but 8 of them vanished from foster care shortly after. They were found days later in Spokane, Washington, hundreds of miles away, in a vehicle driven by one of Bateman's adult wives. The children hadn't run because they wanted to. They ran because they were told to. And they still obeyed. And that's where the story becomes something larger than one man. Bateman was charged with dozens of federal counts. In December 2024, he was sentenced to 50 years in prison. The judge called it effectively a life term. But here is the detail that should unsettle every person watching this. At the sentencing, some of the parents of these girls showed up to court, not to support their daughters, to support Bateman. The prosecutor noted it plainly. The girls had become the adults in the room. One of them, standing before the man who had taken her childhood, read from a list written in red ink. She told him everything she had done since being freed. She got her driver's license. She dyed her hair. She joined a school play. She wore whatever clothes she wanted. And then she said the line that mattered most. "Now you can see I never needed you, and I hope you get everything you deserve," which is absolutely nothing. Here's what this story is really about. Bateman didn't build a following from scratch. He didn't need to. The architecture was already there. Decades of conditioning had built a population that could not function without a prophet. Jeffs didn't just control people. He removed their capacity for independent thought. And when he went to prison, that capacity didn't return. The obedience just transferred, automatically, to whoever claimed the seat next. That's not a flaw in one remote desert community. That's a flaw in any system that teaches you your own judgment is dangerous. Any system that makes questioning authority feel like betrayal. You don't need to live in Short Creek for this to apply. This story was never really about one man in a trailer on a highway. It was about the red threads, the sex ban from prison that froze an entire community in place, the small fingers reaching through trailer slats that no one was supposed to see, the parents who sat in a courtroom and chose their prophet over their own daughters. Most people saw a cult leader, but the details told a different story. A story of a vacancy manufactured by one predator and inherited by the next. That's what we do here. We follow the red threads. One case at a time. One story at a time. If that's something you want to be a part of, subscribe to the Red Threads. The next story is already waiting.